think just the difference in approach between the two seems to be Anaplan has more of a platform approach. They're looking to enable different kinds of users and bring them to the platform and enable them in their use cases. Where OneStream seems to Amit's point, seems to be more focused on opening one door in the organization, but kicking it open basically with a really good product that goes after a very particular type of use case. So that's been my experience from just evaluating it, paying attention to all of the different reviews and so forth, but obviously much more familiarity with Anaplan. Just a difference in approach.
Thank you. Marty, I'm going to ask you because I know you keep your pulse pretty close to emerging technology. So what do you think?
OneStream is very optimized towards just, it's an application optimized for finance use cases. When we evaluated their platform against Anaplan, it was really an application that was built upon looking at the financial close and consolidation process monthly, transaction matching and finance data quality and reporting analytics. It's basically what Hyperion should have been if you put it into the cloud. The problem is when you want to get into other use cases for other departments, such as demand planning for sales and et cetera, it kind of falls down when we were starting to look at it. I know they're starting to get into that space, but we viewed the solution as still a little bit immature for the kind of financial planning and forecasting that we wanted to do in our company. As Jim was saying too, a lot of those guys are Hyperion folks. So they're basically going to market as being like a Hyperion replacement in the cloud. And, when we were getting, some of our sales calls, because we were initially a Hyperion based company, that's how they were marketing and positioning themselves. Maybe it's changed over the last couple of quarters, but that was their go-to-market strategy.
I'm going to kind of open this up a little bit with the last 15 minutes we have. I'm showing here Adaptive. I do want to, focus on them. Workday made the acquisition. What I'm hearing from your peers, anecdotally, is that Adaptive doesn't really hold up feature set wise. And the other issue is that Workday is being really aggressive with their pricing for it. I've had one of your peers flat out say that they will give you Adaptive for free if you join in the larger deal for the Workday financial modulation. So I'm just curious, does that resonate with you guys? And let's just switch the competitive positioning quickly to Workday. Marty, you, and then maybe Jim will jump on that.
Yeah, we just recently were negotiating our Workday contract, and they were trying to convince us to rip and replace our Anaplan instance with Adaptive for no cost, and they would pay for the switching costs. We obviously refused because we're getting great performance out of the platform. I think what Anaplan has done really well, their customer engineering organization is awesome. They got our POC up and running in 2 weeks, and we were immediately using the product. And when we asked them, technical questions, and finance questions, they answered them more as a platform company and a SaaS provider than they did as like a financial or a typical Hyperion-based company as well. So for us that was game changing in terms of getting that POC up and running fairly quickly.
And Marty, I wanted to say, you mentioned earlier that you had 6 or 7 ERP implementations, and anyone who knows this industry, they know that an ERP implementation usually means the end of your career. So kudos to you for going through 6 of them and making it out.
Yeah, I mean, moving to a single instance of SAP when you have 12 different instances currently running can definitely give you some gray hair. So, but we fortunately had a good team involved in it. So.
Thank you. Jim, I'm going to jump over to you. Marty had just mentioned the ease of implementation. That was another question that was submitted to us. Maybe you might be the right person to ask, since I have a feeling you probably led the implementation for your company. But the question was, what were the pain points around Anaplan's implementations? And do you think they could do anything to improve that going forward?
Yeah, so just to piggyback off of the prior question, we also had the same experience with Workday. 2 years ago, we decided to switch our HRIS system from SAP to Workday. And throughout the negotiations, the Workday sales team encouraged us that they would throw in, their adaptive insight module for free. And it was just a moment of like, there's got to be more value for you than that, right? But I think we were so happy with Anaplan and how it was performing for us that we just said, you know what, you can put it in, but we're not going to use it. Okay, but back to your question in terms of implementation of Anaplan. We leveraged the AVAR and SI to do our implementation. Anaplan has a 4 core module implementation, which is get your requirements, get your modeling, implement, and then deploy. I thought that was a very easy methodology for us to follow from an IT technology perspective. And we were able to easily follow that model and roll out our Anaplan production. Some of the things that I would say were pain points were your FP&A team needs to be mature and have mature understanding of the business models that are going to be built. We had some bumpy roads in terms of models not being solid, and so we had to go back, and sometimes it has a ripple effect on the back end where you have to make changes to the structure of the setup. The other pain point we had was because we're an integration company, we like to poke our tool into all the systems that we use. And one of the discoveries were when we needed to access the workbooks where the models were living, we realized that only administrators had full access to at the field level. So learning that, we had to go in and update permissions for all the fields and workbooks that were needed to be integrated. It would be great if Anaplan on a roadmap had some type of preset role-based configuration that says, this is for an integration, read only. And you don't need to worry about enabling access to each of those fields.
That's great feedback. I appreciate it. Real quickly, want to talk about, you mentioned you leveraged a VAR and an SI, and the channel can be so important when you're doing deals of this size. So last year, when I did the deep dive report that I was showing earlier, one of the concerns that came up was the channel relationship and Oracle, right? I mean, we could sit here and joke about, how much value is Workday getting out of Adaptive if they're throwing it in for free. But it still does create some real roadblocks for a smaller company like Anaplan, right? They don't have the market cap that Workday has and that Oracle has. And Oracle's influence in the channel is so incredibly strong that I had one of your peers tell me that they had a major SI refuse to do the project because they didn't want to piss off Oracle. So now clearly feature set wise, Anaplan is better, but how do they navigate these 800-pound gorillas in the marketplace, particularly when the channel is so important for lead gen and implementation? Gustav, you've been quiet for a little bit, so I'm going to ask you, sir.
Sure. No, I think it really comes down to differentiation. As we talked about before, the platform approach versus the niche play. I think that's how you differentiate yourself in a market where you do have those large, well-funded organizations competing against you. In other spaces, I think of ServiceNow, the journey that they've been on. They were up against the same set of enterprise level funds, well-funded organizations. And they reached out in a particular in the same way. They went from IT to HR to finance to others, and we just saw the chart you had where they were, I think, furthest on the left.
Yep.
They were in the same spot about 10, 15 years ago when they had to compete. And I think Anaplan in the same way has that opportunity to differentiate as well, and just continue to generate the interest, generate the conversations. We're here talking about it, which means that there's interest. If that fades at some point in time and the focus shifts onto something else, I see that as a big threat. Then it's easy to forget them.
And how about to the panel, with the time we have left, let's make it jump ball. Feel free to cut me off and jump in whenever. How about Oracle in general as a competitor? Maybe not just, them playing bully in the channel, but their ability to really push Hyperion in the cloud, like or I forget the marketing word that you were using earlier, but if they really focus and push, do they still have the ability to compete in this space? Anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, we've evaluated Oracle from their database solutions all the way up to their ERP and planning solutions. The thing that's a really detractor from using Oracle is that their cloud platform is really immature. To run any of these applications on Oracle infrastructure is a heavy lift on any technology team, to the point where we have a strategy in place to move our entire infrastructure away from Oracle. So the one thing I would say is I don't really see them as a competitive threat unless they can really up their game from an infrastructure and cloud enablement perspective, because Oracle Cloud isn't even on the radar for most CIOs or CTOs as a set of capabilities that they want to use.
Yeah, and I would say the same with the IBM SAP, right? Unless you're already on their legacy stack, they're really not players in the space either. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair. And I would say functionally, Oracle is getting better. But I think Marty's 100% right. They need to understand how to run a cloud. Running an application in cloud is very different than running an on-prem and just move it to cloud, right? So I think they need to show that maturity level for CIOs and CTOs to invite them to the table. Functionally, they are getting better. No doubt about that, at least in my opinion. And they will compete head-to-head with OneStream and Anaplan. If you're just looking from a functional lens, Oracle might be a very strong competitor to Anaplan.
It's interesting. Anaplan's only been public for 2.5 years, but the company's been around for 15. It's not like we were talking about a cloud-native, cloud-born company. So they were just very quick and skillful in adapting to the SaaS model, whereas unfortunately the other three behemoths really have not been. Anyone want to add anything on that, Jim? I feel like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I would say, a lot of interest in seeing how Oracle behaves, but my mind is always on how Microsoft's going to progress with, Dynamics and all the various analytics, all the things that they're doing and the speed in which they're delivering, these enhancements weekly, daily. It's like I'd be more interested in hearing about their progress in terms of attacking the financial planning component, right? Maybe even an acquisition.
There's also a bunch of OneStream isn't really the only startup starting to make headway in the planning space. I think there's a couple key ones to keep an eye on. I think Planful is another one that is certainly starting to gain momentum in the marketplace, and is being used by small to medium-sized business. So they could start eroding some of the the headway that OneStream and others are making. So that's one to keep an eye on.